How's it going, everybody? This is Darren. We are ready for Matthew on Mondays, of course, dealing with John because we're in the middle of Lent. So the Lent text for today is John 11. Pretty much the whole thing is what they have in the lectionary. So I probably am not going to read it all. We are waiting for a couple of people to jump in and join us for the conversation. So, anyway, so John 11 is the text and deals with the raising of Lazarus from the dead. Just a kind of summary of the story. Jesus is in another town with his disciples. He gets word that Lazarus is sick, and he sticks around for a couple days or whatever. Then he tells them that Lazarus is dead, and they need to go, and they show up, and then he has a couple confrontations with Martha and Mary, and then raises Lazarus from the dead, and that leads to some confrontations with some other folks. But I see that Marcy's here, so we'll jump right in. Hey,
how are you?
What's going on?
Not much.
All right. What you been up to?
Oh, nothing. Just work. A lot of It's grant season.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of writing and editing and reporting and all of those good things. And trying to squeeze in some basketball in between all
that. Right. Yeah, most of the people that I was interested in have dropped out. So
yeah, right. Yeah. Nobody. So I think they said no one's bracket is perfect. They had like 22 brackets after the first round were still intact, according to I guess ESPN's bracket.
Right.
And then after yesterday, nobody's bracket.
No.
Yeah. So
after what was it that after the 16 beat the 1 or whatever that was
FDU
that busted a lot of people right there.
Yeah.
So are you preaching?
Well, no. The church where I was preaching, they called a covenant pastor who started last Sunday.
Right.
But they have called me his contract or his covenant agreement. He's off on 5th Sundays. So I was asked if I would do 5th Sundays since he could not. And I said, okay. So April was one of those 5th Sundays, but I will be taking exams, hopefully for the last time. And then there's one in July and October. So unless I'm preaching, I could get called to preach anytime, I guess. But those are the next 2 that I know of. I did something that, so very contrary to what my Presbyterian self would say, which is, you got to study. If it's not Presbyterian, you get. But there's a guy that I follow on Twitter, Rich Velotis, who I really like a lot. And he did like a master class on preaching Saturday, just 6 straight hours of reflection. Wow. And it was just like 10 to 4. But he had some. I feel like I missed the other Rich Voles.
Right.
Being in class and not having kind of ongoing education, and I'm trying to read the books, but there's so much going on. I thought, this might be worth it to do like an afternoon of just hearing about preaching and getting updated on some things. So he talked some of the things he talked about, Rich talked about in class, and I am trying to read some other people. So it's something I want to get better at. I don't know that I love doing it all the time, but I do want to be better at it. And if I ever am called to a church, I really want to be able to do that well. So yeah. It's a growth edge. So
there you go. Yeah. It's an interesting
How are you? How's
interesting
Lent
task,
treating you? Yeah, yeah,
interesting. It's an interesting task.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, everything's going well. I mean,
yeah,
we're just cruising through Lent.
yeah,
Seems to be going pretty fast. Um,
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, it's gonna be should be interesting.
I mean, yeah, it's coming. Yeah, it'll be Palm Sunday. What, in 2 weeks? It's like,
Yeah,
wow, that seemed to go really fast. So I don't
I know
know.
we'll be jumping back to Matthew before we know it.
I know, right? Well, we're
Yeah.
gonna do. Oh yeah, back to Matthew. Then we go into Acts later. I think. Right.
Yeah, I think yeah, after Easter I think that there's a bunch of Acts texts. So yeah, we'll do some of those, I think. Get back to Willie.
Well, it's funny you say that. I'll just this guy Rich Velotis, who I did the master preaching class on
Hmm.
Saturday. Toward the end, he said, and I'm going to give you a few names of people who I really listen to as I'm preparing
Right.
sermons or teachings. And he had some names, and then the last name he said, if you're not reading Willie James Jennings, what are you doing with your life? And I thought, okay, well, you're not Presbyterian, but that's good enough.
Right.
He
Yeah.
said, if you're not reading
Yeah.
him and reflecting on him, and he said, then what are you doing with your life? And I was like, okay,
Right.
that's an endorsement, I think.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting because but it is kind of, I mean, uh, it's hard to find his stuff. I mean, he doesn't have a lot
yeah.
of it's not like he has a lot of stuff out there. But
Did you see the
you can read the same stuff over and over again.
right?
I mean, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Did
Yeah.
you see he's gonna? Do you get Presbyterian Outlook?
Um,
He
I did see that he was going to be in there or
That
something.
new issue, the
Yeah.
belonging issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were selling extra copies. I
Right.
get I get one copy a month, but I don't know that I need. They also did that for the Listen to Black Women issue
Right.
that they did a couple years, I guess last year. So,
Yeah.
but anyway.
Yeah.
Well, are we expecting Mark in
Yeah,
Lent?
Mark's going to be a little bit late. He said he's going to be about 15 minutes in, he said,
Okay.
because he's doing some stuff. So, yeah, so
Well, what do you want to say? What do we want to say about?
that is a very good question. Yeah.
Well, I sent those lectionary texts too.
Yeah.
I don't know if Leonard and Mark use those, and typically I just read the gospel, but I do have a devotional that I'm using that each week they present
Right.
reflections and readings on each of them. And this is the first time that I just kind of felt like, oh, they all kind of fit together. And
Yeah.
so yeah,
No, I
I
do
don't
think that bouncing the Ezekiel off off of this one, with the dry bones, obviously,
right, right,
adds something to the text for
right,
sure.
right.
I guess what I'm trying to, I guess what I'm having, like, I'm kind of struggling with is, you know, throughout readings, throughout the other texts so far, like, I think I've leaned kind of into the symbolic nature of them, like
Right,
Nicodemus as a symbolic character, the woman of Samaria as a
right.
as a
Oh,
symbol,
okay.
as a symbol of basically, Jesus embracing the Samaritans and then become, like, as a group,
Mm-hmm.
as these scenes written for John's community, to help
Mm-hmm.
them, and maybe not necessarily historically, you know, about two people sitting at a well or whatever,
Right,
and
right.
then, last week, in the Gench
The
text
blind.
and others, the blind man as kind of a representative of the community as a whole, so
Mm-hmm.
now, as coming to this text, you know, it's interesting because you have these kind of, more historical characters
Yeah.
that, that play a part in the synoptics. And, so I don't know. So I'm just trying to figure out, like, how, like, if I, how I think about this, like, historically,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then, well, like,
Because you have
uh,
Mary and Martha who are.
did you ever take the John class with Francis?
No, I did not, and I
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
get a chance. I apologize. It's just I didn't get a chance to read I circled one thing on page 87 where she talks about the idea that you only hear the words "I am the resurrection and the life" at funerals, and
Right.
that you know you should say it. We should say it
Right,
more
right,
often.
right, right, right.
And
Maybe it's
so
not a bad thing to, yeah.
yeah, not to say not just saying it there.
Right. Yeah.
But it's I mean it's so interesting that I don't think I've ever gone to a funeral. Most funerals that I go to, it's always Psalm 23.
Mhm.
And in my house there are many, in
Right.
my father's
14,
house
John
there are many
14. Yeah. Yep.
so
No,
um
exactly.
yeah, that's all the
Yeah.
last one I went to last week, the same thing. And it's like my father's was that way as well. So
Yeah.
mm.
Um, well, um, this book, is
Oh,
it backwards? Is it,
it
uh,
is backwards. That's okay. Well, let me
let
just
me,
hold it and I can read it.
uh,
Writing,
let me,
written that you may believe.
yeah.
There you go. Written that
Yeah.
you may believe.
Written that you may believe. It's, it's has a, it's got a, a fairly broad kind of feminist approach.
Mm.
But
Who's the author?
her name is Sandra Schneiders.
Okay.
But she does this kind, I think in kind of each one of the sections, she kind of does this uh she kind of looks at the spiritual, like she looks at history, theology, and spirituality, kind of takes those pieces. And what she says here is spirituality is lived participation in the paschal mystery of Christ. While history lies behind the text and theology is expressed in the text, spirituality is called forth by the text as it engages the reader.
Mm.
So I think like that's what I've been trying to wrap my head around there is what, like it's saying it's saying something about these particular characters, but it's also trying to draw something out of us, you know, um,
Mm-hmm.
beyond just, well, I guess the thing is, typically when I've been taught John or when I've read John before, it's kind of like, what's the amazing thing that Jesus does that makes it clear that Jesus is so amazing? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but like, and if that as if that's the kind of end goal of the text, is just to
Oh.
believe that Jesus, that Jesus is more special than everybody else, in some way, or,
Okay.
or God, or what, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
which I think that's fine, but I think there's also something that, like, but
And then,
what is it trying to draw out of the community that hears it? What's it trying to pull out of you? You
and you
know,
see that differently than Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
well, I think John just kind of like, maybe it's because Jesus is talking so much and like,
Yeah.
making such a big deal about it. You know what I mean? Like, you know, um,
The I am, all the I ams, right? Are
yeah.
in John. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know. I think this text probably is the harder one to figure out
Mm.
what to say about it, because you get so caught up in like, the resurrection story,
Right.
bringing, and then you have people, like, if you're treating certain things as symbolic, like, then you don't have to get all deep into the skeptical science side of,
Right.
what what all of that, what I mean, which is
Yeah. Yeah.
a whole nother thing to deal with. Yeah. So I think this is a
Wow.
tough text, and it's also, like, you already have to you already have to come up with something to say on Easter, and now this is like making you do like
Oh, think
pre-Easter,
yeah, that's right. It's it is.
pre-Easter
Yeah.
people, like, it's hard enough to, like, figure out what to say about the
Oh, I know.
resurrection,
Easter is
you know,
so yeah, that's such a hard
besides having
it's
like a
so hard.
second dose here.
Right now, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm trying,
You're just starting your process to think
no,
about
I've
it.
been dealing with it for, I mean,
Really?
I
Well,
usually,
I mean, you've been in John. You've been kind of
yeah,
in John for
well, yeah,
um
well, the folks that help put the bulletin and everything together,
Yeah.
usually like to have everything like I finish the notes on like Monday or Tuesday for the not for this Sunday, not for the coming Sunday, but the one like today I just finished I sent the notes for Palm Sunday.
Oh,
I put
wow.
the
Okay.
bulletin together because
Right.
sometime this week they'll put it together. Then we have the online stuff, so they have to put all the graphics
Oh,
together,
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
So I'm always thinking, I've always kind of done some study already early, 2 weeks ahead of time because I don't like to put the bulletin together without actually having some idea
Yeah. So
what I
you've
might
been
what
so
I
yeah.
might say about the text. Now, whether it
So
actually
you've been
turns
talking, yeah, so you've been dealing with Lazarus
right for a
before this
little,
week,
yeah, for a little
a
while.
little last
So
week. Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
so yeah, so yeah, I'm just yeah. So I'm still wrestling with it.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
still um
Is it wow, is it helpful? I mean, just thinking about, like you said, the characters, um, reflecting on, yeah, I mean, I think maybe Francis hit upon it a little, maybe, where Martha's like, well, yeah, I know he's going to live again
right,
later. Yeah, I mean, so
yeah,
she's affirming, I guess, that she's been following and understands the teaching.
right,
And he's like, yeah, no, but like now.
right, yeah,
He's gonna
yeah,
live again now. And I don't think she understood,
right,
And I think, there's always this talk about the disciples, I guess, especially in Mark, about how they just bungled and just never
yeah.
got it. They just, and I don't know. I think I can empathize with
Well, I do, yeah, and I
sometimes
do think,
just
yeah, right.
struggling with it.
I do think there is some. I do think there's some interesting things about the different characters in the sense
Hmm.
of, you know, uh, Martha kind of gives a very like she does have kind of like a. I mean, she doesn't understand necessarily what's going on, but she believes
Right.
that it's possible. Whatever. If Jesus
Yeah.
says it, okay, fine. Whatever. If you're going to say, like, I'll go along with it.
Mhm.
Mary's a little bit more. A little bit more skeptical, and she's got the other folks around her as well.
Right.
Um, so yeah, you could probably do something with that. I do think there's also this kind of there's a question of like what happens in Jesus' absence and what happens in Jesus' presence.
Mm.
Because like everybody seems to believe that Lazarus wouldn't have died if Jesus was present.
Right. Right.
And then when Jesus is present, Lazarus is
Lazarus.
raised. You
Right.
know. Oh, I see. Yeah, there's Mark. Let's see if I can. Hey, Mark.
Hey, my friend Marcy.
Hey.
Yeah.
Hey. I made it. My my sabbatical is over. I'm here.
You're here. All right,
Yeah.
all right, all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right,
Trying
all
to
right,
get a
all right.
handle on
So
Lazarus.
what y'all talking? What's
It's
going?
I
Yeah.
well, I have a question about, so I mean, is this, well, I was just, this, I can't remember now. Does this happen? This happens after, because when he goes to the house and Martha's cleaning and Mary's at his feet? That's in Luke, right? Or is it in all? I can't remember.
I think it's definitely in Luke, I think, but I don't remember if it's in other ones.
But it's definitely not in John,
Yeah,
right? It's not in John. Yeah.
I don't think so.
Well, and it's interesting.
But
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
well, I just wondered, timing wise, this happens after. I mean, conceivably, that story happens before Lazarus dies.
Right.
Am I right? Okay.
If you're trying to harmonize Yeah,
Yeah.
if you're trying to harmonize.
Yeah,
But I don't know if do we really want to harmonize?
no, I don't know. I just was asking. I was just thinking
Yeah.
about it.
Well, it's just that's probably the most common
Yeah.
association people have with Mary and Martha
Right.
together,
Yeah.
right? If
Right.
if they are familiar with that,
Yeah.
that story probably is the one thing. Yeah. Well, I mean, and there is some really interesting things in the text about, just how intimate Jesus is with this family. You know, what I mean,
Yes.
like,
Mhm.
that's some fascinating stuff. You could pull some stuff out
And I
of.
like what Grange has to say, and when she talks about where John is emphasizing this high Christology. This is probably the most. I don't know. I don't want this to come off wrong, but this is probably the most human we see Jesus,
Right.
probably in all of John.
Well, and I like this part where I had never really even thought about it, about Martha and Mary are Jesus's adult friends.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because they love him, they are not submissive or subservient. They are not in the least afraid of him. They are not sullenly, silently angry. They do not accept what has happened as the will. They tell him they're angry and why.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
he does not simply tolerate these uppity women. He values them. He chooses them as close friends, and he trusts them in their anger with him, and he trusts them with his life. So,
And I think that's really critical in this text, that he does not dismiss their anger or their emotions.
Mhm.
And I think we would look at this text as a paradigm for doing pastoral care. And one of the dangerous things we do is just dismiss folks' emotions, and not let them be adamant or let them be expressive about how they really feel.
Right. Yeah. 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 I mean, and he's disturbed right along with them, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's
I don't
so
know.
hard because, like that's the thing is so difficult is, I mean, because I guess I think that what's hard is that the text is saying something that I have a hard time saying, I mean, like you're saying with pastoral care, like letting people be letting people express their full range of emotions, letting people, but in some ways this text seems to be like offering these kind of like some of the like the platitudes, like that you would hear
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
face of death, like no, this person's going to live forever,
Yeah.
like and
And that's
Jesus can raise them right
yeah.
now, I mean, like,
Yeah.
so it's like, I just, that's where I think, I guess I'm getting like kind of, that makes this text so difficult.
Yeah.
It's like,
And I mean that's probably John and his community wrestling with those uh, everlasting life and who
Mhm.
Jesus is and emphasizing that. But yeah, I hear what you're saying in terms of that.
Yeah.
So I mean that's John being a little bit preachy.
Right.
Yeah, but he does let the text does let Martha and Mary vocalize their emotions. And he doesn't run away from that. But I hear what you're saying about that, Darren. That's true.
Well, and I mean, in this, I was telling, in this book right here, she puts the question this way. Sorry. She says the problem's not that Christians die too soon. It's that they die at all. I mean, there's in some sense that John really wants to affirm that, like, if you believe in Jesus and Jesus' presence there, that you will never die. Like in some sense, whatever that means. Like maybe you physically die, but there's some way that you don't ever die. And that's what. Yeah, for he is the resurrection and the life, right? I mean, what does that mean? Like,
yeah.
There's a reason why we only say it at the funeral, because like that's the only time we think it might make a little bit of sense.
That's it.
because we're willing to make something out. We're willing to say something about resurrection, which the Bible never says.
Yeah.
Because basically what we're saying when we say it at the funeral is that what we think resurrection means is that when someone dies, their disembodied spirit floats off somewhere,
Right.
Yeah.
and that's the resurrection, which is clearly not what, that's not what the Bible's saying.
Yeah.
But it does sound nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she talks about that on page 87, when she says, how regrettable then are the words, I am the resurrection.
Oh, yeah.
She talks about that, but
right.
I guess she's talking about the eschatological begins now and
right.
build in the future. I guess she goes into that the eschatology piece, but I guess we need to do a better job of fleshing out for folks and help. And I don't think we're, y'all help me with this. I don't think we're called to answer this question, but I think we're called to push folks to find their own answer in terms of what this means. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, how do y'all feel?
Well, I'm comfortable with that.
You're right. I know, but I know that when they're sitting there listening to you, they want to walk out and say, "Yes, he explained that perfectly." Right. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let me just read that. Let me just read that. That little section of her text, before where she says that regrettable part, because I think maybe she quotes John 10:10, right? I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Death then is but a transition that does not break the bond between the believer and God. It is important to try to wrap one's head around this point, for it is one of John's most distinctive and important theological emphasis. When the evangelist John speaks of eternal life, as he does frequently, he does not speak simply of future hope or of life that lasts forever. He speaks of a quality of life that begins now and continues forever. Life that partakes of the goodness and joy of God and is full, rich, and enduring. That quality of life emerges from the transforming and fulfilling experience of intimate relationship with God, and is, to John's way of thinking, fully accessible now through Jesus. Indeed, fullness of life in the present receives far greater emphasis in John than future hope, though both are affirmed, and may partly explain why Jesus spends so much time with Martha and Mary, the sisters of the deceased, en route to Lazarus' tomb. The Gospel of John's decided focus is on the living.
Yeah. And you think that this is a reason that this concept of is fairly new, and fairly new when you look at the development of Jewish theology. It's fairly new about this idea of eternal life. I mean, you go back Old Testament, they hadn't arrived at that point yet. Right. So this is fairly new. So I guess folks are trying to really flush this out. What does this really mean? So this is new for them too.
Right. Yeah. It takes place in this text, right? I mean, that Martha understands in her tradition that there will be a time when the dead will be raised, and there will be this new age that comes about, and she knows her brother will be resurrected on that day. But Jesus is saying that whole situation is happening right now.
Yeah, the abundant life starts now.
Right. Well, and I think it's clear in other texts, that certainly the day of judgment happens whenever Jesus shows up in John. Right. The day of judgment is, as soon as Jesus is on the scene, the day of judgment is present in him. You need to decide.
Make some decisions. Make some choices. Yeah.
Will you remain blind, or will you open your eyes and see? Will you,
Yeah. No doubt. You're right about that.
Are you and with Nicodemus, are you willing to confess and witness, and claim your place as a believer? All that stuff is
So in John, in the Gospel of John, Jesus embodies both life and judgment right now.
Right.
In John.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then, following those two examples, and what I guess is the struggle? Like, what is this? What is this interaction? You know, what is he confronting Mary and Martha
Mm-hmm.
with in this situation? Are you willing to?
Do you,
I don't know.
do you
God,
think
that
it's
is
more? Do you
that is
think it's? Do you think it's confrontational? Or do you think it's more? Do you think it
well,
is
no, but
confrontational
Well, it is from their side, right? At least.
yeah.
because of their grief?
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I mean, they are asked. They are faced with a decision, right? They have to believe. They're asked to believe. They're asked to believe that Jesus is the resurrection and the life, right? That's what they're asked to believe.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I wish I could remember where it is. Someone talks about this progression through the text. You know,
Wasn't in
yeah,
here.
yeah. No, I think it may be.
Well,
Is it the
Yeah, I
Left
don't know.
Behind guy?
No, I was just. I think it might be. It might be this book.
who's that?
This is O'Day. She has this book about
Oh,
preaching the Gospel of John, because she goes through all these texts. I think she might talk about, how, like, with Nicodemus, there's kind of like he's asked to recognize Jesus as kind of light, of the light of the world, just kind of, and then uh
the blind man.
the blind, well, before the woman of Samaria is asked to recognize that
Yeah,
Jesus is
right.
the Messiah, right?
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, and then the blind man is asked to recognize that Jesus is the Son of Man, or the one, or the Messiah, or the one, and he says, Lord, Lord. And now, and this is maybe the tough part about the text, is that this is where, Martha and Mary are being asked to recognize Jesus as,
Hmm.
the one who brings the resurrection and the judgment and life,
From death.
right now, like in this time
Yeah.
present,
Yeah. I wonder. I wonder if it's possible to look at the other way. You said,
right?
Marcy, that Jesus confronts them, but I wonder if they really confront Jesus with their grief and loss.
Mhm.
Is it possible to look at it from that
Right.
perspective?
Right.
And also, I'm thinking about, not only are they upset because of they've lost a brother or a loved one, that they probably lost their economic supporter and survivor too.
Right.
I mean, they depended on Lazarus probably for their
Right.
survival. So
Yeah.
he probably was
He's the
the breadwinner
breadwinner.
for that household.
Breadwinner in the family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of loss
Right.
that's going through this text.
And I think, and someone, someone talks about how, part of the question for the community behind this is, what does it mean to possess this life-giving, joyful, full, affirming, abundant life in Jesus if your loved ones die?
Yeah.
Like, what, like, what,
Yeah.
like, what does that mean? Like, what, like, how do you reconcile those things?
And y'all have to refresh my memory
Yeah.
again, Dan. Okay, the community that we're talking about with John, have we ever placed where this community is?
Um,
Um,
it's Asia Minor somewhere, I think, like,
Somewhere in Asia Minor.
like kind of around the same area where, like, Revelation would have been written to, or,
Okay.
if I remember correctly. But
And
I mean, this is later on. This is much, this is later on after, everybody's died. But most likely the proclaimed author of this is long dead.
Yeah.
Before this was written. So yeah. But I do think there is something that's trying to be said about suffering and death in
yeah.
this text.
Yeah.
I just don't know how to wrap my head around exactly what it is that's being said. You know what I mean? Or how to translate it, maybe, into
Yeah.
today's world. Like,
I think one of the issues is, I think a lot of times we all try to run away from suffering and death, and one of the you can't run from it. And
right.
this is something that we courageously wrestle with, and I have to give Martha and Mary credit for courageously wrestling with this thing with God. And I think that one of the things that I think we do such an awful job in Western culture is wrestling with difficult issues with God, and
Mhm.
and calling our folks, telling our folks it's okay to wrestle with difficult issues with God.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and I think I'm trying to kind of wrap my mind around it too. I mean, because it was great to be able to wrestle with it, but came back to life. They were able to
Yeah,
see and talk. I
yeah.
mean, and I mean, yeah, I mean, I went to a memorial service in Friday for a 44-year-old woman who died of cancer and left behind a 15, 13, and 10-year-old.
Oh,
And that's just hard to take. That's just,
Right.
and again, I said to Darren, we read the Psalm 23 and John 14,
yeah, traditional.
and
Yeah,
it's just, and I think I said to somebody when they called and told me that she had died, I said, I understand it. Seminary trained and all. I said, and tomorrow maybe I will start to think about and remember the promises of God. But today I'm just like, really,
we're sitting with your grief, sitting with our
it's
grief.
just not some that wasn't. I mean, by then the service was a few days later. So, and but it just is. It just seems like, yeah.
But I
So
guess,
where do you find that?
yeah,
Like you said, Dan, where is that abundant life like
yeah,
right now
yeah.
for those children,
Mhm.
and for Brian, her husband? I mean,
Yeah.
I just, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Difficult questions.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do think, obviously there's, obviously there's a way that we have to be, the presence of Christ for people, so
Yeah.
Right.
the community has to find a way to bring life, maybe not in the way that of like, bringing someone back from the dead,
Yeah.
but somehow bringing life,
Yeah.
But I think, and I hear you, Marcy, in terms of that. That's difficult, but I think we're just called to be there, and we just have to give people space to grieve, give people space to sit with their emotions, and give also people space to arrive at answers which is meaningful for them, and that process takes time.
Right. So you could argue that they're compared to other stories, this one takes a while.
Yeah.
So there is some room. I think definitely what you're saying, Mark, is like especially with the Mary and Martha side of things, and you have the mourners present,
Right. Yeah.
like the whole, like you have that whole thing. There's definitely a way to like really sit in that part of the text.
Yeah.
But I think it's hard to not, like, you can't blame the people who skip past that and go to what Jesus does. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Like if like it's hard to blame the people who would acknowledge that to some point but then go and offer some kind of like maybe overly enthusiastic affirmation of positivity,
Yeah.
because that's what Jesus does.
He does.
You know
Yeah.
what I
He
mean?
does that.
It's so
Yeah.
like I mean,
I guess I'm
yeah.
just thinking about the few times I've took pastoral care,
Yeah.
and we were always told that that the platitude things is wrong.
Yeah.
I won't say it's wrong, but it's not the best approach.
Right.
That we're just called to be there, be honest, let folks be honest,
Mm-hmm.
and realize this is that we're not just called to give
Right.
answers.
Yeah.
As much as we want, my heart wants to give an answer, but
Right.
but I have to understand my calling is just to be there,
Right.
to offer the gift of my presence, if
Right.
that person will accept the gift of my presence.
Yeah. No,
And
I think
sometimes folks don't want that,
right.
and that's fine too.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I just think you can see how easily
Oh yeah,
you could use this
oh
text.
yeah, oh yeah.
I mean, because the text is, well, I think this is maybe the point that really is something that I think we always need to wrestle with, especially looking at all these stories in John, is that to never think that we're Jesus in the story.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I mean,
Bam, bam, bam.
I
mean,
never
like,
think
just,
I'm
Bam,
Jesus.
bam, bam.
I mean, just
Yep.
never think that you're
Yep.
Jesus. And, like, because when you like we talked about with the woman at the well,
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you can go off into a very colonial like direction if you just want to think that you're Jesus in the story. If you don't try to put yourself in the position as a disciple or as the woman or as the townspeople or as the, you know what I mean? But of course, like in some way, we're supposed to identify with Jesus, as Christians. We're supposed to, we're supposed to. But I think, like in this text, again, like it's you don't necessarily want to be trying to speak to people as if you are Jesus in that situation, like because you could see people challenging people basically to get over their grief. Because they should believe that the person is resurrected in their way of understanding that. I mean, and but I guess it's interesting to think about why is Jesus troubled and why does Jesus weep?
And that's I was reading some stuff that some people were saying that, and then I just don't see this in the text. That Jesus wept not because he was grieving with Martha and Mary, but he was upset at their lack of faith. And I just don't see that.
Right.
I don't see that whatsoever. But some folks that were saying that I don't see that.
Yeah.
I guess I choose that to identify with a God who feels with us, who feels our pain, and is there with us as we deal with our pain.
Right.
I'm comfortable with that.
I mean, that's and it's but I mean, it's also it makes you kind of hesitate about a too easy. I mean, in some ways, Jesus is saying that he's going to raise Lazarus from the dead from the very beginning. He basically the way he talks to his disciples on the way there.
Right.
It's clear. But but in the midst of it all, even in the even though there's some way he knows that it's going to happen, there's still all the grief around it, and all the pain around it.
All the pain,
that's it's interesting. I don't know what to make of that, really.
I was trying to think that one thing that Jesus does not do offer excuses for that Lazarus died, and I think sometimes that we do that too. So somebody like you, Mark, dies of cancer. Okay, that happens. Or somebody dies tragically in a car accident or in a drive-by shooting, and we want to find rationale for it. Jesus doesn't try to find a rationale for death, and I think that's helping. That when we do that, we don't allow folks to truly enter into the grieving process.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I know people die, get sick, people die tragically and suddenly, but we that's a reality. But we have to we have to let people go through the grief process.
Right.
And I think sometimes we don't want people, we don't want nobody to feel pain or go through pain. But in order to heal, you've got to sometimes have to sit with your pain.
You know, it's funny. It's funny you say that because since I've been back, you know, I'm the clerk of my session, and one of the things that I have to do is when a member dies, I have to write a letter of condolence for the family, and usually I have to read it at the service.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so I think the first letter, one of the first letters I had to draft, I sent it to the pastor, or I had somebody look at it, and they intentionally. And then this happened again at the end of the year. We have a necrology service
Oh, wow.
where we honor the folks that died. We light
Yeah.
candles, and their family members can come. And I remember trying to draft that thing also, and I had written something about, you know, they, you know, we honor Mr. Evans who died on. And I remember just the pushback about just saying that he died. I mean, it's like every other word. No, we can just say he transitioned on this day, or he. And I remember thinking, well, just to your point about not letting people kind of sit with it, not even acknowledging that word. Sometimes for me, it's just it has been since I've been back at church. It's been really no one wants to say that a person died. They'll give you any other word. They'll say, well, can't you say it this way? And I'm like, I don't know what that says.
You know what? And we, so many other cultures have better ways of dealing with death than we do in America. We're just awful. We're awful.
I don't know.
So many other cultures they're just better with it. We can learn from so many other cultures in terms of dealing with death and dying. We're awful.
Yeah. What is the other book? The other book you have, that feminist, that one that you have, Darren, that you showed me. Was there anything in that was kind
of?
Because now you got me thinking. I think, yeah.
I mean, you know, like one thing she says here that one thing she said, she says, Christian spirituality is neither escape from real life nor denial of its pain, but a way of living that is transfigured even now by the resurrection and the life which is Jesus. Then she talks about how, Martha represents the kind of faith and belief that John is trying to draw out of his community. She believes that whatever, if Jesus says that Jesus can raise him from the dead, she believes it, and that Mary and the Jews with her kind of settle in, really show you the kind of how it's not so simple. I mean, there's the grief, like you're talking about, there's more going on there, and they all all together, they all kind of show the full range of responses. It's interesting because she also makes a distinction where, in John's gospel, that John in this chapter especially uses the word Zoe, the Greek word Zoe, and at other times uses the word psyche. So like there's two different, like the Zoe life is always used to talk about like the eternal life, or the enduring life, or the the other kind of life that John is always talking about, you know.
Yeah.
But then the other one is just your natural physical life, you know. And so there's the balance between those two things that happens in the text as well. You know, so yeah, I'm still, yes. you know, she says the believer who dies will live, the living believer will never die. 11:25-26. In both cases, the life in question is eternal life, which does not yield to either physical death, however real, or the death forever, which cannot touch the believer. She says, where did it go? Oh, I lost it now. Oh boy. Yeah, anyway. She says in the end, she says, eternal life conquers death without abolishing it. You know?
Yeah. That sounds about right.
Yeah. So yeah. No, I think it's well, it's also hard, you know, because people have such interesting understandings of resurrection too, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, that
Yeah.
whole side of that whole, it's one of those things you have to delve into so deeply to get there. Yeah. Yeah, I was trying to go back and find some things about, I think I know I have some things a couple places just about this idea of life in John, you know, especially like the eternal life or the abundant life,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And I think I'm going to have to go back and kind of really get a better handle, you know, on what's being said there.
What's being said, yeah.
Wow.
Because I think there is a way that, and I think it all ties this chapter together in an interesting way, you know, like that this life is kind of, part of it is an invitation to become children of God, right? I mean, that's from like John 1 and later on.
Mm-hmm.
And then that leads to this kind of way that we are drawn into not only relationship with God, like the Trinity or whatever, but also that we are drawn into relationship through that with other believers.
Well,
you know,
with
or-
each other,
or-
yeah.
And that,
With
and
each
that
other in
leads
community.
and that
Yeah.
leads to that friendship,
Yeah.
you know, that you see played out in this
Yeah.
text, you know,
Yeah.
that it leads to the, you know, the adult, the adult
friends.
friendship, you know,
Yeah.
you know, that, yeah. And so, yeah, there's something, I think there's something there to be said about that as well. And I think that maybe, yeah, that kind of, there's some kind of way that we all share in this life that's united with God.
God. Yeah.
That
And it's done in community. We share
right.
with each other. We share the joy. We share
And
the
the
joy
pain.
together. We share the pain together.
Yeah.
We share in community, which gets us away from the American view of life in terms of this whole individualism type thing. It really challenges that.
Right. And I think maybe that's the issue. That's kind of the hard thing about the like the understanding of death and eternal life, and you know, and grief and all of that, is that we also have a very we have a very individualistic way of dealing with that too, or a very we narrow our community of support.
Yes.
Maybe it's not individual, but we tend to narrow our community of support in tragedy.
Yeah.
Instead of broadening it, you know, instead of leaning into it.
Yeah.
Probably because most communities are terrible. at it, at helping you through it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Say
Yeah.
more about that. When you say we narrow,
I think like whenever, like, I think when someone faces a tragedy, like say like the people that you're talking about, the people,
right?
you know, who
Yeah,
lost someone
yeah,
after the funeral, you know, usually they will end up going into kind of a shell themselves, you know, and try to just soldier through on their own,
yeah,
you
Yeah.
know.
yeah,
And partly because a lot of communities are terrible about helping you through,
I mean, you're
you
you're
know,
right. I mean,
yeah,
through grief.
yeah,
you're absolutely right. After the funeral, you know, I mean, and the funeral's okay, but everybody goes home,
Right.
and that's it.
Well, and we
Yeah.
often don't find ways to you know, to continue to acknowledge
Yeah.
grief, you know, continue to acknowledge um pain like that,
yeah,
especially in churches. I think we're you
Yeah.
know, like I mean, you know, like in churches, basically, if you don't show up as your best self, you know, we got a hard time with you. You know,
Yeah.
we just don't know how to
yeah,
deal with you.
Yeah.
You know what I
And
mean?
I
Like,
think that goes back again to that this text forces us to be honest with ourselves and what we're feeling. And
yeah,
I think in general, we just have a hard time doing that,
right.
of
yeah,
being honest about how what we feel and how we feel. You know,
Hmm.
we have a hard time with that,
Yeah, yeah,
and we have a hard time with folks with letting folks and saying it's okay if you're not, like you said, if you're not your best self
right.
today. It's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
and I actually left the service feeling like, because the preacher said that very same thing, that that we have to allow ourselves to grieve, and we have to,
Hmm.
and especially the family, and um but I know that they had youth group that night, and I think Clarissa and Dalton were present.
Hmm.
I mean, it's like, it's because I was like, I said to the youth group leader, "Are you having group tonight?" And she said, "Yeah, we're gonna keep going, and they'll be the ones to tell us
Hmm.
if they want to continue or not."
Right.
Hmm.
And she said they were both there. The two that are in youth group were both
Right.
there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and they're just going to go forward. They announced, something that we can do to donate to the hunger fund that they had started, and make a donation in her name. And but
Hmm.
they were like, we're gonna keep going. And if you fall apart, you fall apart. But for me, that was a sense that they wanted to kind of stay in community with them.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
because I was like, "You're gonna cancel group tonight?" She was like, "No, not at all." And
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
want Dalton and Clarissa to come.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so at least in this case, I hope,
Right.
Darren, that it's different for
Yeah. Yeah.
this
Yeah.
family. For this family, I'm
Yeah.
No.
hopeful that it will be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing this text does is we have this. Well, sometimes, unfortunately, we have this capitalistic interpretation of the abundant life,
Hmm.
and certainly this text helps to chase away that the abundant life is how much money you have in your bank account, and you're able to go to Hawaii when you want, and whatever.
Right.
No, it's just that's capitalism getting into Christianity, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. It's hard. Yeah. What does this tell us about what abundant life looks like?
Yeah.
Wow.
I will say that what I really wish is I could find some old. Maybe I could just go through the Union website and see if the YouTube page. But I remember that when I was there, or when I was back one time, Dean Kenny came
Oh,
and preached on this text,
wow.
and I remember most of his sermon was about the last line, or of that of 44. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go."
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I can see Dr. Kenny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh wow.
I can
Yeah.
see, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that.
So,
Yeah.
so somewhere out there, that's floating around. You know, they probably recorded it at some point,
Yeah.
but that was
Unbind him and
good.
let him
That
go.
was good. You know, yeah. That is the hard thing about these long texts. I mean, there's so many different
There's
pieces.
a lot in here. There's a lot in here.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot in
So
here. And because it's a lot because it's a lot of uncomfortable stuff in here and stuff that we're not comfortable with, and it just forces us to sit down with it.
Well, I've been lucky because they've been doing a little Bible study out of Gench's book
Yeah.
after the service, you know, so I always feel comfortable saying, look, I'm going to talk about 3 verses here. If you want to hear some more about the rest of this.
Well, it's hard. It's hard to cover everything, right? You can't talk about all of it. Don't you have to kind of be strategic and zero in on
yeah.
But you also can't. I think it's also hard to just not read the whole thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like you kind of want to have the whole context, but you also want to, you know, But anyway, it should be.
Yeah. I remember my pastor reading. I think he didn't read the whole thing with the woman in the well. And I remember thinking, why are you not reading the whole thing? And he was like, oh, I'm not going to read all that. You can go read that later. And I'm like, oh, read the whole thing. But anyway.
Yeah.
Well, the last thing I'll say about it that I think is that I've been noticing a lot is just kind of like the really interesting kind of irony in John, you know, because obviously like Jesus just brought someone back to life, right? Like, and then like the immediate response is to try to kill him.
Try to kill him.
And kill the guy too.
Kill Lazarus,
like kill Lazarus too, you know. So anyway, that's
kill him too. Yeah, right.
Just like with the blind man, you know, it's like they spend all this time like it can't be him. No, that's it is him. Well, then whoever healed him was a sinner.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well. Oh well, thank you both.
What's next? What's next?
Well, next back to Matthew. Next, we got the triumphal entry coming in.
Oh, that's right.
Matthew.
Yeah, I think we go back.
It's Matthew's version. Okay.
Yeah, Matthew 21, I think it is.
That's right. Palm Sunday is next week.
Yeah, Palm Sunday, and then I don't remember what I said. I think we may end up taking a little break after that.
Break. I think you had a break. Yeah.
Because going into Easter and all that.
And do your kids have spring break in that mix somewhere? Or?
Yeah, my kids, I think they start spring break next week, maybe.
Oh, okay.
So the week,
I think
the week up before Palm Sunday.
They have a long spring break, so I think they have they basically go from sometime next week, I think, until right after Easter. So
okay,
they'll be off my whole family will be off the busiest time. Busiest time of the year for me. So.
Jared, how do you choose between the palms? I mean, I guess because it's palms. Does people preach on the Passion too?
I think a lot of people do because nobody does Good Friday services anymore, really.
Really?
I mean, not a lot of people do. You know, I mean,
are you doing Monday, Thursday too?
It's kind of interesting because this year we have the local symphony is doing Haydn's 7 Last Words of Christ in our sanctuary on Good Friday.
Okay.
So, but they're also rehearsing on Thursday, but they're rehearsing kind of later in the night. So I think we're going to do like a kind of like our own little mini Last Supper, have a food and communion mixed, sing a couple songs and do that sort of thing.
Are you washing any feet? No.
No, I'm not washing.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll save that for, people with, I don't know. I've heard some interesting stories about it. But
I think I've gone to one service like that, but yeah.
That's what
I
you said.
think
Some people are just
You said
bold.
so nobody in your area does Good Friday there?
I think maybe some of the Catholics do, you
Really?
know,
Wow.
Yeah,
some of the
yeah.
things, but yeah,
Wow.
Mhm.
Okay.
yeah. So
We're having one. We're having one too.
I
You
mean
have Good
that's the
Friday?
thing.
Okay.
If you know, I mean, if you don't have Good Friday, then you go from Palms to Resurrection. You don't ever
Yeah.
actually talk
Mm.
about you don't ever talk about the part in the middle. So a lot of people try to do Passion in
Okay.
there.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no,
All right.
we'll be dwelling we'll dwell on it for a little while with a whole
Okay.
symphony, you know,
Okay.
symphony production. So
Okay.
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
All right.
I
All
don't
right. So
remember
yeah,
the
well,
beginning. So next week is our last week for
yeah,
a while.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then let's see what I said. I think
I have your paper. Wait, I think I printed it and left it in here.
yeah, I
Here
think
we
maybe
have it. I found it. Um.
I might have said 3-6, but I don't know. Um 3 oh yeah,
Well,
yeah,
327. Is
right.
that next Monday?
That's
You
next
have us
Monday. That's
doing.
next Monday. Yeah.
Yeah,
You
so I
have us
did.
doing Matthew 28.
Yeah, well, I think that got a little bit fuzzy because we
Oh, okay.
weren't gonna do John. I was gonna have us
Oh,
do
right.
Matthew.
Okay. Got it.
I was
Got
gonna
it.
have us do Matthew all the way through, but we started doing
Right.
John. So we'll probably 27th we'll do Matthew 21, 1 through 11.
Got it.
And
Matthew
then
21.
yeah,
Matthew
1 through
21,
11.
1 through 11.
Okay.
That's the
That's the entrance, right?
Yeah.
palm. Yeah, that's the lectionary text.
And then
For,
we'll see about when we come back. I mean, I had us originally not coming back till like May. So
May 1st is what I have.
you know, but maybe we'll get one in before that.
Okay.
And when we come
I'm
back in
taking
May, you have us in Acts.
yeah.
You have that? Okay.
Yeah, there's a
Okay.
few little acts there. And there's more acts before that. I'm taking the 23rd off myself. You know, so I'll probably preach one of the John texts after Easter and
Okay.
then have take the next week off and then
Yeah.
what
And
there's
I'll
only
join
one
you
more
as
week
I
after there's only one more week after that before May, I think.
I'll join you as much as I can, but I'll be studying for Ords
Orbs. Okay. Okay.
in April. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that starts in May, right?
No, it starts. So they'll announce the book on April. Probably not April 1st. People might think it's a
Oh.
joke, maybe. So maybe the 2nd or 3rd
Right.
they'll announce the
Okay.
book. And then the
Right.
test starts the 22nd.
Okay.
Through, you're done by the 30th of April.
Okay.
Yeah. It'll be
Okay.
done.
Okay.
Right.
But last week I think there was an article in Presbyterian Outlook that the group that did the test apologized.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
finally kind of apologized, but they said that they felt that it was defensible, and I don't want to. Well, they felt that it was defensible.
Okay.
Well, there's
But they recognize the harm that it caused, and they're sorry. Is what
well, I mean, I guess I would say there's a probably a broad divide between sensible and wise, maybe. Or,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
Well, you know,
Absolutely right. Absolutely
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
defensible is a low bar.
Right.
Yeah.
You can do some stupid stuff and still
Yeah.
say, well, I had a good reason, you know. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Oh,
All right,
well.
y'all. Good stuff.
Yeah,
You.
thanks a lot.
Yeah.
This was helpful.
This was
Is
good.
it, you sure? I felt like I was like
I
no help
I
to you at all.
I came in.
It's good to talk it through.
I came in quite came in quite befuddled by this one, I'll say. But now, yeah.
All right, Guy.
All right.
Y'all
All
have
right,
a
y'all.
All right, see you later.
Have a good week.
good week. All righty. Bye bye.
See y'all.